Good evening, you're watching Estuary TV News. Coming up, mortgage to the hilt. A Beverley Building Society celebrates 150 years of lending. And Gentleman of the Turf,
for over 20
Grimsby
years.
groundsman's long career is recognised by local sportspeople. And I'll be talking to Bayard Tarpley about waiting times to see GPs. Welcome to Estuary TV News. I'm Hugh Richards. First of all, it's over to Emma Lingard for the news headlines.
Hello. Hull City have laid down the turf for a 3G pitch at Airco Arena despite a backlash from community users. It came hours after a pledge by Hull City Council to support City's bid to become a Category 2 training academy and days after negotiations to build a pitch elsewhere. Stephen Brady, the leader of the City Council, said he was saddened by the club's latest move.
It's something that we've had to endure for the last 4 years. And while I've been totally and utterly supportive of the club and the Lambs in terms of the investment that's been put in, I really am so disappointed that the response that's been given.
More than 30 firefighters attended a fire at a derelict building in Hull. The Methodist Church on Lambert Street was well alight by the time fire officers arrived in the early hours of Wednesday morning. An investigation is now underway as to the cause of the blaze.
There were 4 pumping appliances and 2 aerial appliances that attended. Crews got to work and surrounded the fire pretty quickly, and the fire was knocked down by around 5 or 6 o'clock this morning. It was under control. At the moment, we've got 1 crew still in situation and they're damping down and hitting the hot spots that are still left.
War Memorial plaques taken from Wickenby War Memorial have been returned. The 2 bronze crests were left on the steps of the Dam Busters Inn at Scampton by an unknown person. They've since been returned to Wickenby Museum and will move to a new site. A Scunthorpe eyesore is open for public consultation as to what it could be used for. The site of the former Scunthorpe Cinema on the crossing of Nancy Street and Oswald Road has been standing empty for 7 years. Now members of the Scunthorpe Town team are encouraging people to get involved this Saturday to decide what goes there.
We're having a campaign, we're having a Have Your Say Day on Saturday, this Saturday, April the 18th, from 10 to 4 at Cafe Indy. It's in association with Cafe Indy. And basically, we're asking the public to sign a petition calling on the council, North Links Council, to use its power to improve the Majestic Cinema site, which has been derelict for 7 years.
And finally, a bookshop in Woodhull Spa has benefited from a grant by best-selling thriller author James Patterson. The book fair planned to use the £2,000 to set up reading sessions for toddlers. Owner Catherine Farris is delighted with the funding, which comes 6 months after the shop moved to bigger premises. She said it was all about engaging children with real books. That's all for now. Bye.
The financial sector has suffered in recent years, its own fault, and taken many of the rest of us down with it. Nevertheless, not every financial institution has reaped the whirlwind. The Beverley Building Society thrives as it bases its decisions on good relationships with local business. We are indebted to Emma Lingard.
While many shops and companies have struggled and closed, there's one small independent who has survived for nearly 150 years in the market town of Beverley, and it's thanks to its customers. The Building Society opened its doors in 1866 and it's still going as strong today as when it started.
The people of Beverley are very proud of the town. That reflects in the way people get involved in all aspects of the town's life. And having a building society which is independent and takes the name of the town and serves the people of the town, I think because of local pride, people support that.
Its success is down to its loyal customers, and while other banks and building societies have suffered, there's hope this one will continue for another 150 years.
There's a very loyal customer base, there's a very clear strategy, and we focus on a limited range of products rather than trying to be all things to all men. So, you know, our original heritage in 1866, we were founded to look after people's savings and help them buy homes. And in terms of where we are in 2015, it's trying to follow the same principles as our founding fathers.
You're watching Estuary TV News. A little later, Richard Morris will be here to report on the business of local government and local politics, and Dan Kemp will bring you the sports news. The NHS is permanently under stress. It's hard to imagine what success would look like. A shortage of general practitioners sometimes means long waiting times. Bayard Tarpley from Healthwatch has been involved in a survey of waiting times for GPs in North East Lincolnshire. Bayard, thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
What prompted this research?
Healthwatch is all about encouraging people to have a say on the health and social care services they use. Last year we did a survey about what kind of things were concerning people, and the number one issue by far was GP access. You know, when you can get an appointment, how long it takes to get that appointment, working around, you know, work times, things like that. All sorts of different things around getting an appointment and seeing the right people at your GP practice.
And so your research, your survey, what were the results? What did you discover?
Well, we're still actually actively taking results until the end of this week. At the end of April, we'll be putting together a report based on everything we found. We're not just talking to patients, we're talking to the doctors themselves, the practice managers. But so far what we've found is over 50% of people who have replied to the survey are either fairly or severely unhappy with how long it takes for them to get an appointment and how easy it is to get an appointment.
What would make them happy, though? I mean, presumably one is fairly unhappy if you're uncomfortable or in distress and you have to wait for an afternoon or a morning.
Well, we've had a couple of case studies where it's been more than that. Different practices do different things.
What would make them happy? Come on to that, where it might be more than that. But I mean, you say that you've got your statistical boxes to tick, fairly unhappy or more than fairly unhappy. What would make them happy? Instant 5-minute access?
Varies, not necessarily. I mean, it varies from practice to practice. Some practices here do a walk-in and wait system. Other practices locally have tried that and the patients weren't happy with that. They prefer knowing exactly when and where to be for their appointment. It varies from practice to practice, and that's what we're hoping to find, what a general level of best practice is and what each practice individually would benefit from.
Sorry, I interrupted you. You were going to talk about some case studies.
We had one lady, for example, who had a mild case of dementia, who had called her GP for an appointment and was told to call the next day for an urgent appointment. She called the next day and was told there were no appointments left, call the next day, and she did this for 3 weeks before she finally got to see a GP, and it turned out that she had a broken foot. This as opposed to when she'd originally called and they said to either call the next day or they could make an appointment a week from now, and she said it was too urgent to wait that long.
And so she wound up waiting 3 weeks rather than just
3 whole weeks instead of just 1.
If she had a broken foot, though, is a GP service the appropriate thing to go to there? If you have a broken bone, I'd have thought then one would go to A&E.
Normally you'd have thought so, but I mean, this lady's circumstances might have prevented her from doing that. She might have felt more comfortable going to a GP and might have thought that that was the right thing to do. I mean, with all the news stories that say don't go to A&E for everything, she might have just thought it was safer to go to a GP. So to have to wait that long.
3 weeks is an outrageous wait. I mean, there's no point in, I mean, whatever's wrong with you might have cleared up in 3 weeks, although, of course, if it does, that means that the GP appointment was unnecessary in the first place, doesn't it? But you need to know a bit more quickly than that. How long, if you can give an average as a preliminary result of your survey, how long are people waiting?
It really does vary from practice to practice. And as I say, what else makes it interesting is the number of variations in what people are and aren't happy from practice to practice. There's some people who wait 1 or 2 weeks and say that that's fine with them. There's some people who get appointments 3 days to 5 days and say that that's too long. As I say, it's completely different from practice to practice, and that's what we're hoping to find out if there is a common pattern. But until we analyse the results more fully, we can't really tell.
And are people in different parts of North East Lincolnshire more or less patient? Can you say that the people, say, of Cleethorpes are much more willing to suffer in silence than the people of, I know, Laceby?
As I say, we haven't analysed the results fully yet. We're doing it until the end of the week. But when we do, we're hoping to find those kind of patterns that will hopefully help practices do what's best for their patients.
How reactive are surgeries? How reactive are GPs to what their patients say they want?
Most practices locally have a patient participation group, which is a group of patients that have their say and act as sort of liaisons between the GPs, the practice managers, and the patients. They come in and they say, this isn't working, this is working. And they tend to be the groups that sort of get things moving along. And I think that most practices that have that are quite receptive to what they have to say.
So what would be, I mean, I suppose the big distinction is the people who offer you an appointment service, and you phone up and say, yes, you can come in 48 hours time or tea times, or you just turn up and wait and hope to get a doctor on spec?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, those are the sort of extreme versions. I mean, it completely depends on practices. Some of them have triage systems now where maybe you can get telephone callbacks.
Sorry to interrupt, Bayard. We'll come back to that. We'll keep talking about that. Please don't go away.
Yeah.
A Grimsby groundsman has been looking after local sports grounds since 1991. Now, after almost a quarter of a century of stripy turf and neat white lines, his work is to be recognised with a local award. And, as Richard Morris reports, he has loved every rollered bump and every neatly clipped blade of grass.
For over 20 years, Martin Deans has been a groundsman. His background is originally in horticulture, but in 1991 he decided to make the change into maintaining sports grounds. Now he's been recognised for a local award for his work on grounds in the area.
Well, I belong to an organisation called the Institute of Groundsmanship, which represents groundsmen across Europe, effectively, and with that in there, I'm one of the ECB's cricket advisors for Lincolnshire, and through that we have regional advisors. A gent called Tom Rowley's the regional advisor, and he's come down to see me several times on this site as they're working closely with the Links FA on football development and pitches to raise the standard of pitches. So he's come to this site and was thoroughly impressed with what he saw.
So presumably there'll be some kind of glitzy awards ceremony?
Not as yet. We haven't had that yet. I believe that's going to be taking place in August, where the Links FA have their awards night, which we'll go and we'll gladly collect this award on not just on my behalf, but on behalf of the facility as a whole.
Martin says it's a year-round commitment, not just a job for the summer.
A year is not long enough in this game. It really is not. We really don't have enough time in the day. Obviously, you get the dormant periods, but with the way the climate's evolving now, and the seasons are changing year by year, there's not one season that will be the same as last year. It'll change year on year, so the role in that sense has changed. You could have a prolonged summer into November at times, and in other times it'll cut you short.
I'm still with Bayard Tarpley from Health Watch. We were talking about waiting times to see a GP. We were talking about the possibility of making an appointment and getting it a few days in advance and knowing that you're going to see a doctor at that time, or just turning up and queuing, as it were, or running a triage system. Now, which of those is going to be preferable is going to depend on the nature of your illness or your injury, isn't it, really, rather than where you happen to live?
That's true, yeah. It depends on your circumstances, it depends on the illness in question, it depends on what the practice can and can't cope with. I mean, we have lots of small practices who have the resources to spend more time and effort with each patient, and other practices that may have more facilities but fewer staff. It's finding that median and figuring out what works best for every practice and every patient.
Everybody's going to think that however long they have to wait is too long. What's the problem? What's the solution? How do we solve it?
That, I think, will come out with analysing the data of the survey. I think a lot of that is going to come from, there may be patterns that we didn't think we'd see, and there may be practices, as I say, where they and another comparable practice are doing very different things, and one of them's working really well and the other isn't. And if there are situations where both of those practices have similar dissatisfaction rates, then we can look at that and see whether that's the problem.
It's always going to come down to a ratio of the number of patients and the number of doctors, though, isn't it? The number of GPs. Is the solution not just to have more doctors?
I think that's easier said than done. I mean, this whole issue is a national issue, and it's one that's come up in a lot of the political campaigns. But it's something that I don't think we can fully solve locally, but we hope that we can find something that will make it easier locally.
Well then, locally or nationally, why do we have too few GPs?
I couldn't comment on that. I don't know personally why we have too few GPs.
Is it just a matter of chucking money at the problem? I mean, if we spent much more money, GPs are quite expensive.
I would argue that's too simple an answer.
Okay.
But as I say, I don't know.
Occam's razor here, you know, and all other things being equal, the simplest answer is most likely to be the right one. But if it's not a matter of that, it's a matter of management, isn't it?
I think it could be. I mean, like I say, locally what we're looking at is there are a huge variety of different practices, how they run, what systems they have. And some of them are doing well and some of them aren't. And I don't think it comes down to as simple as this system works well, this one doesn't, this management style or this solution to a problem works everywhere.
Is there not? I mean, GPs' practices, the management rests with the GPs. They're quite independent operations, aren't they?
They can be.
Is there not some sort of, just as you're taught that the foot bone is connected to the leg bone when you're at doctor school, is there not also a course on how to run an efficient practice in general practice?
As I say, there is a huge gap between how different practices run. And to give you an example quite locally, there are practices here that work purely on a walk-in level.
Yeah.
There are a couple on the East Marsh, for example, where their model is based around being as accessible as possible to people. And there are other practices that are based around come here and be a patient for as long a period as possible so that we can get to know you and deal with your condition. And I don't think there is any single serving management style that can suit all of those different things. And I think that's where problems arise.
Different demographics, not different individuals or patients or conditions, but different demographics require different styles of service.
It can be demographics, but it's individuals as well.
How much is it the patient's fault? You mentioned before that we are encouraged not to go to A&E unnecessarily. Do people go to the GP unnecessarily?
I think fault is a strong word.
Error, mistake.
I think there's a certain level of patient responsibility to make sure you're going to the right place, but at the same time there are lots of changes that go on, and it's about making sure that those changes are effectively communicated. 111 is a service that people are told to use, but that's relatively new. Have people been told enough about it to know when they use it and when they don't? Pharmacists are extremely helpful and can actually help look at a variety of different conditions. So in general, we would advise if it's something you would go to your GP for and you're not happy with the length of the wait, then try your pharmacist.
What if you hear GPs telling stories of little old ladies who just want to come in for a bit of a chat?
I think that's a separate problem in and of itself that maybe needs to be looked at and find out if that's another a resource that's lacking somewhere else that can take that pressure off the GP.
Well, I think everybody should stop for more cups of tea. Bayard, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Time now for more obscure, arcane and esoteric language. It's What You Say.
S-L-A-P-E.
Slape.
Slape? Never heard of it. S-L-A-P-E, slape.
Don't clue, never heard it in my life.
What do you think that would mean?
Slip over.
What do you think that means?
Well, you slurp a drink, don't you? How do you spell it?
S-L-A-P-E, slape.
Slip?
Uh-huh.
Oh, well, if you slip on the ice, isn't it?
The answer is icy surface.
I was going to say like a slope. Oh, slope? Did you say slope?
No,
Slate.
slape. S-L-A-P-E.
So basically, yeah, like a slope. Oh, right.
Now here's the sport with Dan Kemp.
An injury time equaliser by teenage striker Kyle Wotton earned Scunthorpe United a point at home to Port Vale. The Iron had gone behind late in the first half through a Richard Duffy strike, but Wotton's late goal meant United retained 17th position in League One. They're now 4 points clear of 21st place Notts County. Elsewhere, North Ferriby United's poor run of form since the FA Trophy success has continued. The Villagers lost 4-1 at promotion-chasing Barrow, captain Liam King with the only goal. They're now firmly in mid-table in the Conference North. In the Northern Counties East Premier Division, Bridlington Town drew 0-0 at Shaw Lane Aquaforce on Tuesday night in front of 148 fans. In Division 1, Grimsby Borough lost 3-2 away at Worsbridge Athletic. Wednesday night, Barton Town Old Boys host Handsworth Paramore and Winterton Rangers are at Knaresborough Town. In cricket, defending county champions Yorkshire have begun their defence of the title with a convincing 10-wicket win over Worcestershire at New Road. Jack Brooks started with 9 wickets in the match and Cottingham's Will Rhodes hit an unbeaten 45 to guide the Tykes home. Next up, they face Nottinghamshire at Trent Bridge starting on Sunday. And another line of Yorkshire news is that coach Jason Gillespie has agreed to combine his role at the Tykes with a coaching position in Australia's Big Bash League. He signed a 2-year deal with the Adelaide Strikers, which he ended up taking during the winter months. Gillespie became Yorkshire coach in late 2011. Don't hesitate to get in touch with any sports stories you have to share with us. You can call 01472 31 553, email sport@estuary.tv or search for us on Facebook or Twitter. And that's all for the sport.
Richard Morris joins me now for a roundup of local politics and what's been going on in local government. Richard.
Hello, Hugh. How are you?
What news?
Well, it's all been sort of very interesting, really, because obviously this time of year, unless of course if you've been living underneath a rock, you should be fairly aware that we have got a general election and indeed local elections also going on.
We have, and the local elections can be a little bit eclipsed by the parliamentary election.
Yes,
can't they?
so of course, and I think what's happening is a lot of people are sort of looking at the general election. They're kind of also forgetting that actually there are also, you know, ward councillors campaigning for their causes and that kind of thing. I know certainly at my house we've been receiving all kinds of things through our letterbox saying, you know, from different councillors. So, I mean, obviously, there's not really that much to say in terms of actual council business because everyone's out campaigning and, you know, doing their thing, trying to sort of win their
And
seats.
there's not much councillors can announce at the moment anyway because of the election rules and the purdah, and civil servants, as it were, at local and national level can't be seen to be expressing policies until after the election.
Yes, and of course any kind of organisations which are involved with the local councils, so, you know, any kind of like, you know, non-governmental organisations that still sort of receive support from government, they also can't put out anything at the moment.
Are you trying to tell me that this is why you don't have any news for me?
Well, we do have some news.
Good. What is it?
We are of course seeing that all of the candidates are out campaigning. We've been seeing Great Grimsby all over the news channels. Now, of course, the reason for that is because in 2010, Labour only won Great Grimsby by about 714 seats. So, of course, once it gets below that sort of magic 1,000 as a margin, it becomes a marginal seat. And so what we've been seeing is the news channels and, you know, Sky and BBC sort of flocking to Grimsby as soon as a candidate appears, saying, you know, what are you here campaigning for? What are you doing? And, of course, that's why we've been seeing such press coverage of all the different candidates attending in Grimsby. So it's classified as a marginal, and it's becoming quite an interesting
Well, the
race.
difference is last time around that 714 majority that Labour held with Austin Mitchell
Yes.
was a 714 majority over the Conservatives.
Yes.
Their Conservative last time round is now the UKIP candidate.
Yes.
And so it's now a marginal really between Labour and UKIP, although they could strip each other's votes so much that the Conservatives could come through.
Indeed.
So it's a fascinating piece of arithmetic going on there.
Indeed. And of course what's happened is, you know, we're seeing for the first time, you know, Grimsby will have to have a new MP no matter what since 1977. That was a fairly sort of interesting statistic.
What about the other constituencies around the Humber?
The other constituencies, I mean, they're nowhere near as marginal. I mean, Louth and Horncastle still has a very strong majority. You know, the various regions of Hull also have very strong majorities, and they're likely to sort of stay with those majorities. It doesn't look
Cleethorpes
as though
and Immingham
stuff
is
will
still
change.
marginal there, isn't it?
Cleethorpes and Immingham is still a marginal.
That was taken by the Conservatives last time
and
round.
of course we could be seeing that, you know, turn to a different party again. It's a bellwether situation.
And Brigg and Goole also, not necessarily a couple of thousand majority there, but still extremely dodgy.
Indeed.
Richard, let's talk about local government in more detail next time, but for now,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's all we have time for this time. If you have a story for us, please go to our Facebook or Twitter pages. Details on the screen. Email news@estuary.tv. Grimsby 31553. Until tomorrow, good evening.
Estuary TV's weather, sponsored by Hornsby's, celebrating 100 years in buses.
Hello and welcome to Estuary TV's weather. A dry Thursday for most with some bright or sunny spells. Some places will remain cloudy with a few spots of rain possible, most likely around the coast with a maximum temperature of 13 degrees Celsius. Generally fine throughout Friday with plenty of sunny spells.
Estuary TV's weather, sponsored by Hornsby's, celebrating 100 years in buses.